Welcome to another episode of Tecman Talks Dynamics. So we are back on the CRM and Power Platform podcast. And today with me I've got Kelly and I've got Ellie, both who work with me in the CRM and Power Platform team. And today's topic of conversation is quoting. And what's the capability in terms of CRM and Dynamics 365 sales for quoting versus Business Central, and where should you do your quotes if you were to use both tools? I think it's fair to say it's been a topic of conversation recently with some of our projects, hence we thought it was a good idea to do a podcast on it as well. So the objective, the aim for the podcast is ultimately where's the right place to quote. What's the pros and cons of both sides of the fence? And I think more than anything, how I'll kind of kick it off is, if we talk about sales process, if we've already got the customer, they're already inside of Business Central, they're already inside of CRM, then there is the argument that you can quote either side of the fence. The detail behind what challenges or advantages we have we'll get through to, but you've got the choice. I suppose one of my big things is, if they're not yet a customer, then why should they be inside of Business Central? Why clog up your customer records, contact records with potentially quotes for business that you may never ever win? Now, the volumes of that depend on how much you quote as a business. If you're doing one or two quotes a week, a month, then it's not really going to make too much of a difference. But I suppose from my point of view, it's also a case of the principle is Business Central for me is your transactional system, your operational system for your customers, your suppliers and all that kind of stuff, whereas CRM is your relationship tool and the tool that should help you get to a point of getting a customer. So let's start by talking about actually the functionality that is on offer, what is available from Microsoft in the Dynamics 365 sales app when it comes to quoting itself. So what do we have? What can we quote specifically inside a CRM? So Kelly, I don't know whether you want to start with that one.
Yep. So the quoting method inside of CRM has undergone a facelift, shall we say? So previously it was quite clunky. You had to click on add product, you had to go and pick things from a drop-down list, put all your quantities, things in like that. And now we've got enhanced sales functionality whereby it just brings a list of all the products. You can search by item number or product name, and you can just put quantities in, anything that matches, click save, and all of your lines are created for you.
So it gives you a pop-out kind of view, essentially, is what it gives
so
you.
it's a lot less clunky than it used to be. And it's actually quite a nice streamlined process.
It's more like a catalogue type search, essentially,
basically.
opposed to a traditional CRM search.
Yeah. So obviously there are certain requirements for that to happen. So you need your products, you need a price list, you obviously need the account to exist inside a CRM as well. So using the standard integration from Business Central, we can quite easily get the item lists and the standard list price lists and all sorts of things integrated into CRM.
And when it comes from a Business Central point of view then, you say we sync items. Mm-hmm. So that is actual listed as items. Obviously, in Business Central, we can, in theory, sell GL codes, resource lines, item charges, etc. So, to be clear, we only are non-inventory as well. But we can only sync, or out of the box, it only syncs items as we know it. So something actually physical. Some people don't have physical items. It could be a service that they put under an item. Yeah. But it is just items.
It is just items, yeah. So now we have the ability as well to respect different units of measure. So previously we didn't have that ability either. It was just the base unit of measure was the unit of measure that came over. But now if you sell something in a pack or a box or a pallet, we can account for that as well in terms of quoting it.
So when you load the quote, you can choose which unit of measure you want to sell that in accordingly.
So it will default to whatever the base unit of measure is on the item, and therefore on the price list and on the quote. But you can amend that as long as the unit of measure is assigned against the item. So you're not restricted to just selling in the base unit of measure anymore on a quote either.
Okay, so we can sync the products across, units of measure across. Again, customers, we know from an integration point of view, they sync across. So if it's an existing customer that you quote in CRM, you can choose their record accordingly. In terms of when you're a business that is quoting for something that, let's say, doesn't exist at this moment in time, or the joys of the sales team wanted to sell something that doesn't exist, selling it, getting the order, and then letting the rest of the business worry about how you're going to source, find, deliver that product anyway, which is not being stereotypical, but salespeople are good at
not uncommon.
Selling the dream.
Yeah. So the advantage of doing quoting in CRM is that we've got something called writing products. So basically you can create a writing product and the description can be anything you want it to be. And then you just give a quantity and you give it a price and you've got it on a quote for your customer. Obviously, how the business deals with that is a business decision. You know, it's various different companies deal with it in different ways. So some people synchronise those over on the quotes and orders into BC, and then they'll use that to set up a proper item and replace that, you know, once the item's set up and configured in Business Central properly. Some people will go and create the item in Business Central off the back of the quote and then sync that item through, replace it on the quote before the order goes through.
Okay.
You know, some people will just leave it as a writing product.
But in theory, you can send a writing into Business Central.
Yeah, you can.
What does that sync it to? Does it sync it into a GL code? Is it into its own item? Does it always hit the same item code each time? Where does this made up thing appear?
So we talk about syncing of items and it only being proper items, inventory items. So in the sales and receivable setup in Business Central, you can determine a non-inventory item for writing products to go against, because obviously they're never going to have inventory. You're making it up, so they can't. But so you can then have a generic non-inventory item, call it whatever you want realistically in Business Central, but that will just sit on the sales order line or the quote line until it gets replaced with a real item.
Okay, so there's some things to consider from a swapping it out, making sure it's set up properly. You've got the whole posting groups. Where do you buy it from? Is it a manufactured item, etc.? So there's a lot of consideration in the process, but writing items are good. That if you don't want to go through the process of setting up an actual item that you don't know if you're going to sell, don't know how you're going to make it, etc. Writing items are one good way of being able to do the sales process, I guess, is the best way of
without having to clog up your inventory list with, you know, items that, like you say, you might never ever sell.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the next one, pricing. So what syncs pricing-wise from Business Central to CRM, and in the view that sometimes if you're quoting projects or custom, etc., and the price is different every single time, but you just want to maintain a margin, to an extent, prices are kind of pretty pointless, is the best way of describing it. But if you have certain customers that live inside of a price system, they get a specific price for a specific product, etc., Business Central, we know, can handle all that. It can handle a lot more stuff as well. So what comes from BC to CRM from a price list perspective?
So the answer to that depends. It depends on the pricing functionality you're using inside of Business Central. So as standard, you get a list price list created. It's called, you know, unimaginably the Business Central default price list. So that has all of your list prices on there. So if you say, you know, like you've got projects, so you just want to maintain margins and things like that, you've got the list price there to determine what your margins, you know.
And the list price is just the sell price that sits on the item card.
Yeah.
There's no further clever way of defining what that means. It is literally just that price. So if it had 00, because you never use that list price that's on there, that's the price.
That's the price that's coming over.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So, you know, if you want to use that price list, you've got to maintain that data. It's the same synchronising anything. If you want to use it, you've got to maintain it. So, and then depending on the price list functionality you have, you can either have customer price groups or some price lists come over. So it depends on whether you've got the new pricing functionality turned on or not.
So old
changes.
experience pricing
Yeah.
is customer price groups?
It's the other way around.
Other way around. Okay, there you go. I'm even corrected.
Yeah.
But essentially, Microsoft have updated the pricing experience in BC.
Yeah.
BC team will cover a whole podcast on pricing, etc. because it's also been delayed in terms of when Microsoft are actually announcing that it has to come in and be in force. But any customers that we're implementing at this moment in time will be on the new pricing experience by default. So when we say price groups, price lists, what do we take that as from a CRM perspective? How do we understand that?
So from a CRM perspective, you can either assign a price list to an account, or you can just pick it when you're creating the quote.
Yeah.
You're not limited to just having one that's on the account. You can have whichever price list you want in reality. And then that price list will then filter down which products are available to be picked to go on that quote. So you can only pick things that are on the price list. So you do now have the ability to turn off the price lists are mandatory, which means that you can pick anything, any product, and it will just use the standard pricing for it. But for the most part, the quote is respective of the price list, and you can only quote what's on there. So.
Okay. So then that comes down into BC has more pricing functionality. So customer pricing off the customer card, customer discounts off the customer card, and campaign or discount price. There's other, I'm not going to go into all the bits of the BC side, but there's more variations on top of just price lists as well that Business Central has. So to be categoric,
no.
CRM does not take those across.
No, it does not.
Okay, which means that how BC works out of the box, if a customer had multiple price lists that were applicable to them at that given day, that given month that they were in, that getting a quote or an order, BC works so it finds the best price to the customer. So the cheapest price, essentially, it finds the best price to the customer. Mm-hmm. CRM?
Nope.
What's best price functionality in CRM?
So there is none. Is the reality of it? Yeah, as standard. There is no best price functionality. It will literally take the price that you tell it to off the price list. So you pick the product, you pick the unit, it takes the price. You can only have one product, one unit on a price list. So you can't have more than one price for this product in this unit on that price list. So there is no variation in it. And then you can allow or not allow your users to then overwrite that pricing.
Okay.
That's how the pricing works as standard in CRM.
Yep.
Obviously, we have a bit more flexibility now because we can use custom pages or Canvas apps and things like that, and we can use it to do calculations and get it to run through data and find, what potentially could be the best price for that item. But depending on how complex the pricing is, if you want to use best price functionality and take consideration of multiple price lists and discounts and all of that kind of thing, you'd better off leaving it in BC.
So, of all that kind of scenarios, leaving it in BC, you could bring multiple. So I think we have the ability to bring more price lists, extend the integration to bring more price lists through.
Yep.
If you quote inside a CRM and you know the price list that you need to choose for that particular quote, then even if it's not part of the standard, but you know that price list, you can select that price list and quote accordingly.
Yep.
If you have multiple and you're expecting CRM to work out on that line, that's the right one to use because it's the best price for that particular day for that customer, then it's not going to do that out of the box.
No.
And the reality is we don't really want to sit there and rebuild the whole entire pricing mechanism to work like BC does.
The reality is that it's that old adage, isn't it? Always comes down to isn't not can we, it's should we. And the reality is it's not good value it's not a good use of our time to try and rebuild that functionality, but it's not good value for customers that already have Business Central either to try and recreate the wheel essentially. If that's the case, they're better off just having the BC license and quoting inside of BC if they want to use that functionality.
that obviously has impact on making people could be a license then for CRM and BC. Obviously, the add-on licenses from Microsoft now does make that a little bit more palatable, as well as there's additional considerations of when a quote links to an opportunity, how do you want that to close, which we'll come on to. But the other piece to consider is, could we not make calls, add the products in, and then make a call into BC, ask it to get that best price for that customer at that point in time, and then return the value. So opposed to bringing all the logic to CRM, we're saying, here's what we've got in this CRM record. Business Central, can you tell us what the number should be?
So we've got the ability inside of CRM to bring in like virtual tables and API calls and all kinds of things that we can do. So there is absolutely nothing that should stop us being able to do an API call to Business Central. Now, I can't say whether or not that action exists in Business Central at this point in time to say, this is the item, get me the best price. But I don't know how hard it would be to actually build it.
So again, there's something that could be explored in that area, that if you didn't want, if the business wants to quote, we leave the logic ultimately, the proof of the logic and whether logic is maintained inside of Business Central, which is where it should be. But potentially CRM could consume that in a similar kind of way that Business Central can give websites, for example, an e-commerce site's pricing, and then it says, okay, well, which one am I using? So whether I'm giving the price list data to a website, Shopify, Magento, or otherwise, or giving the data to CRM, there are similar principles involved in kind of how you approach it. But ultimately, the key thing is BC from a price list point of view is the master.
Yeah. So also as well, with forthcoming technology into the Power Platform and the advent of things like PowerFX plugins and things that are supposedly, they don't work at the moment because they're still in preview, but are supposedly going to be able to connect to external data sources to CRM.
Yeah.
So potentially to Business Central. If we've got that API available and it can make that call, there's no reason a PowerFX plugin can't, on the quote line, go and get that best price from the item from Business Central using that API call and logic when they're out of preview.
Okay. Potentially. i.e. customers shouldn't use it in their life system as it stands right now.
No.
But there is some proof of concept work that can be done.
It's a theoretical thing at the moment, but potentially that's a good use case for a PowerFX plugin.
Yeah, okay. So there are some options. I think we're getting to the point that it's not a cut and dry one way or another, and it does kind of impact what the business does and how they do it. So what about things like discounts in CRM? So yes, you can have prices in BC, but also you can discount on the line as well inside of BC. So how does that work in CRM in terms of dealing with kind of discounts, values, percentages, and how out of the box? So
as standard, CRM doesn't have a concept of a percentage discount on a line. It's a value. Yeah. It's actually called manual discount, and you literally have to give it a value.
Yeah.
So we've got many customers that discount by percentage, not by value. So, we've built in the functionality where they can feed it a percentage and it works out what that value should be and then applies it to the lines. Pretty easy to do, it doesn't take very long.
And would work vice versa as well?
Yes, and works vice versa. And then at a header level, you can apply a global discount that is either a value or a percentage. It does do a percentage at the header level. Okay.
So, not too dissimilar in terms of creating discounts per order, per quote, essentially.
It's pretty much
per quote.
To be fair.
Okay. So that's pricing. So I think pricing so far is probably the most, it's like contentious.
Yeah, probably.
But the piece that should be discussed heavily when it comes to workshops and design in the system.
It's probably the biggest consideration for if you should quote in CRM or BC.
Yeah. So then, on quoting inside a CRM, look and feel. So those that use Business Central or are Business Central customers, listening to this, not yet on their CRM journey or still quoting inside of Business Central, or those using CRM are about to start quoting inside of CRM, what functionality do we get in terms of making quotes look pretty?
So the quotes in CRM are, again, as standard out of the box, word templates.
Yep.
So you design a nice, pretty word template, and you use some functionality that's built into CRM that downloads the XML for you, and you can go and map the different fields to where you need them to go on the template.
So would you say that is a tool, we do a number of them with customers, but would you say for the appropriate skill set of a super user at a customer, that's something that the customer could take on?
It's going to largely depend on the skill set
Yep.
of the person. But yes, we would mainly expect people to do it.
Yep.
We might potentially do the XML part for them and pull that out,
Yep.
and then show them how to do it. But we would expect them to do the template themselves, the design and the look and the feel of it. We're not designers.
And in principle, you get a Word document and you can stick whatever logos, etc., on that document as you see fit.
Yeah.
Okay. So you could argue that you could deliver exactly the type of documents you get at a Business Central, or perhaps better, but Business Central also has Word templates that you can use as well now. So so you could say that they're comparable is the best way of describing it.
Yes.
What if I want it to look really cool? And you're going to go, what does really cool mean? I don't know what really cool means, but I can use another word that you've heard me use before, aesthetically pleasing. Again, what does that mean? The idea is that when it comes to BC, when it comes to quoting, if you're quoting something that's 500 quid, 300 quid, 50 quid, whatever, then a one-pager is usually more than acceptable. If you're trying to quote something that is worth tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions, then having a one-pager, a price, etc., with no additional background, additional information, that ends up being you're expecting me to spend all that money and all you give me is a very, I'm going to say, naff one-pager that's got a couple of tables on it and a figure.
Yeah.
So what can we do, or can we do anything?
So there are tools out there that you can integrate into CRM that will generate better documents, potentially brochures with images and all sorts of things, that you can make a fully fledged, brochure.
Brochure type proposal.
Yeah, as opposed to, just a one-page, here's your quote, this is the lines and that's the cost.
And maybe at best with your terms and conditions on the second page.
Maybe, yeah. If you're pushing the boat out. But so you do have that ability to extend CRM and use, the tool that we tend to use is a tool called Explogic Smart Docs that allows you to go and get information from different places, put it all together. It's still kind of based on a Word template, but it's like a Word template on steroids.
Yeah, okay.
That you can then...
A bit more dynamic, I guess.
Yeah, it's a bit more dynamic. You can put a lot more information in there. And it's just more about being able to go and get the information from different places. When you're using the Word template with the XML structure as standard, you're very limited. You can get anything that's a row down, whereas...
If it's several tables or other references somewhere else.
Yeah, then you're not going to be able to go and get it.
Unless you go and service that back up to the quote record or wherever it needs to be. So you made a good point there. Images, photos, Word templates out of the box CRM. Can I put, without code, can I go and put an image, a picture on a Word template?
In theory, you should be able to. I've never seen it work.
Okay. But in terms of the add-on tools such as the Explogic tool, we've seen it work.
Yeah.
We've done it as such. And it's simple enough to configure to do. Okay. Again, it's the flexibility of what you need of when you quote and how you quote. Because also multiple templates the tool can deal with as well, in terms of you might have a service quote template, you might have a product quote template, you might have more of a contract, etc. to deal with as well. So then that leads me on to, in my mind, a benefit of CRM-based quoting is the process that you can drive from that documentation. So like electronic document signature. I'm not saying you couldn't do it with code and development with BC perhaps, but the reality is in terms of CRM, there are tools out there that can link to electronic electronic signatures.
DocuSign would probably be the most famous of all of the electronic signature things, and they.
It's a bold statement.
Well, who else is there?
Sure sign? Hello sign? Sorry.
Other electronic signatures are available. But
Thanks.
but so they created their own plugin for CRM. And quite a few different e-signature companies out there have also done the same thing. So you go to the App Store and you install it from the App Store. You pay a subscription for, I couldn't tell you how much it costs, but it's obviously not a free service. But you pay a subscription to DocuSign or whoever you choose, and then it just works from CRM. You click a button, it does what it needs to go and do.
And it returns the signed document back to CRM with workflows that can be created as well. So those Tecman customers or your MSAs that you sign, etc., is all driven out of CRM with DocuSign and returned back to DocuSign as an example. Okay. So that's quite look and feel. Can I sync quotes back? So if I was to quote inside a BC, I want to sync it to CRM. Can I do that out of the box by just clicking on Run Job Queue and it just does it?
No, so when you set up the integration between BC and CRM, there's no standard map in between sales quotes in BC and quotes in CRM.
Okay.
As standard. Obviously, this is possible if you extend your integration, whether that be through our integration framework or an API in Power Automate.
Yep.
So it is possible, but then I think you need to consider where do you then close that quote?
Yeah, because I think you could get an external sales team, an internal sales team. Where does the answer go to? And also, where do you convert? 'Cause obviously, BC has that make order button as well. But if you were to close it in BC, if it makes order, then theoretically you close it as one inside of CRM. Or you'd have to create a process that would create it as one inside of CRM, and it would close the appropriate opportunity if it was related to one as well. But if you didn't, it was lost. Well, Business Central is not really great for kind of reason codes and reasons of why you lost a particular quote and stuff like that. Now, I'm not saying it can't be added, it can't be managed to a level with inside of BC, but that's what CRM is good at. And I suppose from my point of view, if I then need to follow up on that quote, how do I do that? Where am I doing that from? Where am I sticking my notes of kind of the quotes issued, do it from BC, we've got it into CRM, for example. So where am I managing my follow-ups, my feedback of whether they want it and do they need a revision and all that kind of stuff. So where should I do it?
So in CRM, you can obviously create tasks against a quote record.
Yep.
You can even add some automation as well using Power Automate to create automated tasks. So you can sort of drive your users to, follow up on a quote when they should be following up on that quote. You don't really have this concept in BC. It's quite difficult to, I guess, know what to do next with a quote.
Yeah. You're just waiting for the answer, I guess, in BC. It's a yes or a no. It's a binary, one or the other kind of scenario. So in terms of from that perspective then, where you then follow it up and manage it inside of CRM, you'd also potentially have to consider if you had a team that had an external sales team and an internal sales team as well. Because we've got customers that someone externally will go and sell the dream, and then someone will come back and say, right, you need to then go and quote for me and get it out the door, please. And dare I say, you then need to communicate that back to the person that, it's gone out the door, it's done now, so you can go follow up with the customer. Based on what you just said, in terms of the tasks, the automations, that would be quite difficult to send those notifications and store those tasks inside of the BC environment. Even though we've got Power Automate that can work with BC, it's still kind of sending you off system to manage your to-do list. So it feels like CRM, even if you do quoting BC, CRM should still have visibility of what's being quoted so you can actually manage the outcome, manage the process there. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So outside of that then, when we talk about the rest of kind of quoting process, and going through my notes, is orders.
Yeah.
In BC, we got a quote, we make order. There's a button, press, it's there, ready to release. You crack on, you create warehouse shipment, you send it to production, whatever you've got to do. CRM, you got a quote.
Yeah.
So what do you do in CRM to then make that an order to get it to Business Central? Does this concept exist in terms of, one, the making the order, and two, the getting it to Business Central?
Yeah. So as I said, there's no integration between the quote tables.
Yep.
However, there is integration between orders in CRM and sales orders in BC.
Yep.
So at quoting stage, obviously the user would activate the quote.
Yep.
And then from there, they can create an order from that quote. So they win the quote, they create an order in CRM, and then they would then change the status of that quote to submitted, and that triggers the integration then to pick up that quote, that order from CRM and create in BC.
So that never used to be like that. That used to be a button, didn't it? From what I recall, that used to be you had to click the submit order button previously, but now it's based on a field change of change it to submitted.
It has always been the create order button that you have.
Yeah.
Changes the status reason. That's all it does.
Okay.
The difference is now
is that
it used to be an API call. So there used to be an API that was listening for that change.
Okay.
Whereas now it's not.
And when we say it's not, so it's running on the job queue, essentially, in principle, in terms of the process is kind of just waiting for that process to pick it up and then land it inside as part of the schedule, essentially.
Yeah, so it can either get automatically created in BC as an order, or it can go to a sort of intersect table in BC, which is essentially just showing the submitted orders in CRM, and from there in BC a user can manually click a button that says create in BC.
So it's like a pending area, I guess, then.
Yeah.
Okay, so so what would happen in the scenario that you get an order, quote to order inside a CRM, and it's a prospect, so it's that customer does not yet exist inside of BC. Would it still send it to BC?
No, so the customer needs to exist in BC first.
Okay.
So this is where sort of a lot of our logic that we create in CRM comes from, to make sure that before that order lands in BC, that we actually create the customer, or we at least update the relationship type to customer on that account record, so it then triggers the integration to send that account to BC as a customer.
Okay. So, but we've got control to essentially extend that out. We've got. So
it's not native, but we can add the logic to make it do that.
To make it easier for the user, I guess.
Yeah.
Is probably where I think you're coming from.
What we generally do is, because it's not the most streamlined process, because you've got to activate the quote, win the quote, go to the order, submit the order, update the relationship type on the customer. So basically what we do is we create a button that takes out those 5 steps.
And does it all in one. Okay. But in terms of the level of complexity, there's no code involved in that. And I want to talk about code.
No, there's no development.
Code, I'm not writing. I'm going to refrain from being stereotypical about code, but we're using the Power Platform toolkit.
We're using Power Platform toolkit to do it,
Okay. So it's a technical consultant's role, essentially, to do it. Okay. So that's the order. So, but when the order's inside of gone from CRM to BC, what's this new bi-directional sales order sync all about that Microsoft have had available for a little while, but still had the old version as well? So what does bi-directional sales order sync do?
Yeah, so as you said, it's a fairly new feature. It's something you switch on when setting up the integration, just the standard integration between CRM and BC. So what this does is essentially, as it says, bi-directional sync. So the orders are syncing from CRM to BC and BC to CRM.
Okay, so in the scenario then, if I submit an order from CRM to BC, and that order, customer rings up and with a last minute change and says, hi, can I go and remove one, add one, etc. If someone then goes and edits that inside of BC directly, does that update back to CRM?
So one of the big limitations of the bidirectional sync of sales orders at the moment is that when that order gets created in BC, it's created in the released state. So theoretically, you can't really make any changes to that order at that point. Obviously, you can reopen it, but depending on how often that your job queue is running. So if your job queue is running every 1 minute for sales orders, for example. You could try and reopen that order,
but
make
the
the
system's
change.
going to keep releasing it.
Exactly. So that's one of the big limitations which Microsoft have addressed, and they are going to be fixing in.
Microsoft don't state it's a fix. Microsoft
Of course
state
not.
it's a design change.
It's a feature update.
It's a feature update. Now, we have our own opinions of that we all agreed that it shouldn't have released it in the first place.
Yeah. But in theory, if the order's open and you make a change in Business Central, it's going to update the order in CRM.
Okay.
When you can.
And then on the idea that, so that's backwards and forwards between the order that was originated inside of CRM. But what about, I'm not a CRM user, I just need to place an order, no quote process, so I just want the order. Tap it away, create the header, create the lines, release it, get on with it. Will that I've just created in BC, that's had no interaction with CRM, will that go into CRM?
So yeah, that will sync across to CRM on the next job queue. Just talking about some more limitations of the bidirectional sync, another big limitation that I've seen in a recent project is the fact that if you're creating an order or quote in CRM and then creating an order from that quote, if you have line discounts on that order, those line discounts will not sync to BC with the new bidirectional sync. I think with the sort of previous version of the sales order sync, they would sync across, but now the line discounts do not sync across. You can sync across discounts at header level, but not at line level.
But we've created a fix for that?
Yes,
Okay.
we have created a fix for that.
So again, another one that we've got to wait on Microsoft. We're waiting to see what Microsoft can do in that area, but we do have a solution for that. So then that leads me to, on the order, got the order, what about when you've got additional comments and notes? So make sure you leave it on my front step, etc., that you want to put on the order, that you've taken the details, but you want some additional comments. So it's not an item, it's literally just additional comments. CRM out of the box doesn't have that concept. No. BC does have that concept in terms of the lines. You can create comment type lines. So how do we deal with that from a CRM perspective when we need these comments of don't put it through the letterbox because the dog will bite you? Clearly, obviously a lot of our customers are B2B, but you might have a guard dog at the front of the reception maybe, I don't know, but how would you deal with the comments?
So it is possible, it is something that we've actually done before.
Okay.
So what you would need to do really is have a custom table in CRM called sales order comments or something like that.
Yep.
You'd then expose that as a subgrid on the order table or quote table if you wanted to add the comments to the quote first, and then have them map across to the order. And then what you could do is you could use Power Automate. So when that order is created in BC, you can trigger a flow that will find the order in CRM, find the related comment lines or whatever you call them in CRM, and then create them as comment lines against the order in BC.
Okay.
The current caveat to that is, obviously with the bidirectional sync, those orders are being released. So if your Power Automate flow runs and that order's been released, it will not be able to update the order.
Yeah.
So obviously that's something to consider as well.
So it's waiting on version 24.1 from Microsoft.
Yeah.
Where this whole released issue goes away. Okay.
Yeah.
So then the other considerations to start to wrap up. So things like tax and VAT. How do we deal with that? So CRM has this concept of tax, but not quite like a ERP system like Business Central does. So what have we done around kind of tax rates?
No, so there's no logic on the quote table in CRM to sort of dynamically populate the tax.
Yep.
Like in BC, obviously, it understands what tax it needs to put on the lines based on a combination of the tax on the customer card and perhaps even the item card as well.
Yep.
There's no concept of this in CRM, so there is something that needs to be built in. I think it is possible to have integration with third parties to be able to handle this, especially if you've got complex sort of VAT customers with complex VAT rates.
Yeah, I think in the UK, yes, there are charities, yes, there are certain products. We've dealt with certain projects where it's clothing, for example, it's different rates, different sizes and that kind of stuff. So we've configured that. A lot of our customers are kind of 20% or zero a lot of the time. But I think if you go to kind of the US, all the states, different rates, different products, it's a whole beast in its own right. So I think, third-party tools would need to come into play. But I think more often than not, tax rates, products, etc., don't tend to be the biggest kind of showstopper from the projects that we've done to date and the customers that we've got. But it should still be a consideration to be aware of what it can do and not do out of the box. And again, it's not code, it's configuration, but it still needs to be considered, I guess.
Yeah, the other consideration for that is as well, like you said, most of our customers are actually B2B.
Yeah.
So they don't care about VAT at quoting stage.
No, but I think the quotes should still state exclusive of VAT or inclusive of VAT and the percentage. And then a couple of final ones, Ellie. Payment terms. So a customer card will have kind of their standard payment terms, 30 days, 60 days, payment up front. And so how do we deal with that on the quote? And then secondly, ship to addresses. This time, I don't want you to ship it to my head office. I want you to ship it to this particular site or office or location instead. Can CRM quoting handle both of those?
So again, not natively. So payment terms is actually part of the standard integration mappings.
Yep.
Obviously, it just gets created against the customer into a choice field on the customer on the account in CRM.
Yep.
Similarly with ship to addresses, there's no concept of that on the quote table in CRM. Well, there is, but there's nothing that's sort of dynamic. Obviously, you've got fields, ship to, ship to, ship to, and same with bill to as well, but there's nothing sort of driving.
It's just text.
It's just text. It's just simple text. But we have, for a customer, we have integrated the ship to address table for a customer before.
Yep.
And then we've added sort of lookups on the quote table to the ship to address, filtered down to that particular
So they can either choose one or potentially create a new one, which would then create a new ship to code potentially inside of Business Central on that customer as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it is possible, essentially.
And there's a few areas like payment terms, making it from the customer onto the quote record, the ship to addresses in terms of looking up the codes, extending the integration, the additional comments, the tax. Obviously, there is always a kind of per customer requirement of the level of complexity, but the ones that we've done before where we've done all this, so we're talking about it because we've done it, how difficult is it to do it? Do we think it's kind of weeks worth of configuration, hours worth of configuration, a couple of days worth of configuration? Is each individual piece that we've talked about, is it complicated? Or is it actually relatively straightforward once we've got the rule?
I think definitely relatively straightforward. As on our team, as you know, we don't use code. We're not developers. We just use the tools that we have available using the Power Platform. So definitely not too complicated. There are things that we need to sort of scope out and consider, all aspects, but something that is possible in a short period of time.
So I guess where I come from that is customers will listen to the pros and cons, etc., and say we can do it, but then the pound signs start kind of ticking around in the head going, well, you can do it because you're software people and you lot can do anything for a price. And the true, there is a lot of capability that we can do for a price, and it also goes back to what Kelly said earlier. Should we as well do it? That's an important part of everything that we do at Tecman. Should we, not can we? But I guess for those that are listening, it's very much a case of don't see it as completely daunting either, because CRM's platform is designed to be configured in these kind of ways. So it's relatively standard practice for us to have to consider these kind of areas. And whether it's Business Central or another ERP system, it's the same process, and other CRM tools have the same considerations as well, I think it's fair to say. Yeah. So then to wrap up, go back to the very start. Should we or should we not quote in CRM? Or if we've got BC, should we quote in BC? Your concluding opinions, I don't know who wants to start. Ellie, Kelly, either of you. What should, if you were sitting here today and in front of the camera and you had to offer a recommendation to the customer, what would your recommendation be? I know what mine would be, but what would your recommendation be?
To be fair, I think it does vary business to business. Everyone's quote process is different.
Yep.
I think you just need to consider all of the things we spoke about today and then look at your processes and then make an informed decision based on that, I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's very very difficult to say, yes, you should do it this way or you should do it this way, because as we've explored, there are quite a lot of pros and cons of doing it one way or the other. But I think if you've got a relatively simple process, put it all inside a CRM and leave Business Central or whatever your ERP system is to deal with the transactions that you need to worry about with your customers.
I think we've got lots of options. I think we can quote inside of both, but we can then share the details. Either way we quote, we can still share the details inside of both, and there's still options. I think we're all agreed. I was going to predict that we're all going to sit on the fence at the end of this podcast. And guess what? We're sitting on the fence at the end of this podcast.
That's not fair. We're not sitting on the fence. We're saying we need to see what's on either side of the fence before we can make a decision.
I'm still perched on the middle of that fence.
Well, maybe so.
So I think on a serious note to conclude is there, as you've heard, there are pros and cons about both sides. Each business can't just copy another business because it's not as simple as that. I think the pricing is one of the biggest drivers ultimately, and the variety of price lists, pricing logic that you have and you will want inside of your business moving forward. The simpler it is, the more choice you have, I guess is the best way of describing it. But yeah, options on both sides, and it needs to be discussed collectively between Tecman and the customer of what's the right way to go. And then we take it from there. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Ellie, thank you for doing your first podcast.
Thank you.
Kelly, a veteran. And I'm sure we'll be back. I'll bring you back in the room again sometime soon. So that's the end of this episode of Tecman Talks Dynamics. Hopefully you'll see us again soon talking about CRM and Power Platform.